Hi,
Hi, Helen. Hi, Catherine. How are you?
very well. We're not sure how the signal is going to work out here. I'm Catherine. That's Helen.
Pleasure. I'm Kasia.
Hi,
Hi,
Kasha.
Kasha.
Hi. So I've got this all recorded. So yeah, we'll go with how your signal is. That's great.
It's looking
So,
good at the moment.
pardon me?
Is it looking good at the moment?
Yes. Oh, and you've already enjoying your afternoon. That's now you ladies are in Isle of Wight with beautiful,
Yes. So
beautiful.
very south coast of the UK, of England.
Nice.
So how did you find out about us?
Instagram. I follow you on Instagram, and I have a couple of other cider peers from England, and you kept coming up in my feed, and so curiosity, I guess. That's how I found out about you. Yeah.
Okay. Catherine's the Instagram queen.
Yes. So, how did you ladies get started?
Yeah,
All right.
how did we get
you
to?
do. You go.
Well, I wasn't a big drinker, and Helen needed someone to drink with.
And fortunately, we discovered in a pub during a long walk we were doing with some friends that Catherine really took to a kind of apple pear blend cider.
It was called Pig's Will.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. I don't know. It was one of those things where we had a lovely walk with a great group of women, and it was a hot day. And we sat down and had this delicious cider, and said, "I want to do this. I want to make this. How can we make this happen?"
That's how it came about. Like you weren't you just liked
It was sort of one of the things we were I guess at that time, it's maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we were thinking about life beyond the desk job. And we spent quite a lot of time down here in the Isle of Wight, and we kind of thought it'd be great to spend even more time down here because our home was London at the time. But we did spend quite a lot of time down here.
Yeah, I worked at the Southampton Oceanography Center, so I used to commute by ferry, and then that's how I learned to love the island and all the corners of it. That's sort of how we decided we might want to plant our feet here and our trees.
Wow. So to go from the idea of, hey, I'd like to do this, to actually making that happen, how did you, I mean, did you have to convince each other to say, hey, let's actually, no?
I guess, it just sort of started as a very small idea, and the more we talked about it, and the more we thought about it and all the different aspects involved, both of us continued to think, oh, that sounds really good, and we could do this and we could do that, and it just sort of grew. But yeah, it started from a small seed and just grew bigger and bigger, and we figured we could do it. It was a challenge we could cope with, but it would be a challenge. We'd have to learn all sorts of new stuff.
We're both scientists, so it appealed to us sort of from the scientific aspect of it, and neither of us had green fingers, but we really wanted to plant things and grow things, and so we wanted to grow apples because I wanted to be buried under an apple tree, so I figured I'd have to plant one. And now we've got a whole orchard. We've got about 250 trees and about 60, 70 varieties, mostly cider apples, but about maybe 10 varieties that are particular to the Isle of Wight, which is kind of nice.
Nice. Now, the cider apples I just saw on your website, there are ones that I have not, like, we don't have those ones here. So can you tell me a little bit about, like, the apples that you use for, I guess, your main cider apples?
Right now, our trees, I don't know, you can't see them in the back. So we plant them. We're planting what's called a traditional orchard on M25 and M111. So they're quite vigorous, big trees with large spacing. Okay. 7 meters.
Yeah, they're going to end up 7 meters apart, and they're going to end up 7 or 8 meters tall
at least. So and so they're just about, I think maybe this year starting to produce. We had a few of them last year, but not too many. And we were lucky enough to find a gentleman on the island who had planted a cider orchard of Michelin and Dabinets, which was quite common kind of in the 80s, I think. And he was getting on and didn't want to harvest them anymore. So he asked us if he could trade essentially cider for apples. So he wanted to get cider back and then use it to sell for his various charities he works on. Oh. So that's pretty much where the batch that we're selling, we actually started we pressed that and actually started selling it. Is doing quite well this year.
Doing very well. So yeah, we started maybe back in March, trying to sell, struggling. People weren't well. For a start, we were in the middle of lockdown, so not many of the bars and restaurants, even shops, were open. And so it was kind of a struggle, and we thought, oh no, we're never gonna sell anything. And eventually, I guess things began to open up, and the sun came out at last. And I guess it's traditionally a very summery drink. And yeah, it's going very well. The last month we've been quite worked off our feet.
So some of the trees we have. So we have. Yeah, it's interesting. The North American apples, I think, are just starting to get sort of the English style cider apples. We have the common ones like Dabinet, Michelin, Yarlington Mill, Harry Masters Jersey, Kingston Black. I think those are all quite common. And then we picked other ones that were, with a bit of research, there's a woman called Liz Coppin, who's kind of the pomologist, a very well-known Copas, excuse me. Did I say? Yeah, anyway, Copas, who wrote a book. And so we went through the book and saw which seemed like it would work on the island. Okay. And then also based on the names, so things like Slack McGirdle, it's a great name. Sops in Wine, which is actually a fantastic tree. It's got this beautiful purple bark and these dark purple apples. That's doing quite well. And then my one that hasn't quite produced, but I like it because I like the story. You'll have to excuse also, we're underneath the local airport. So you might be hearing we're under a flight path here as a Spitfire occasionally goes by. There's a convent that's just, I think, finishing up its days on the island. And very well known retired ancient nun would work the garden there. And she used to produce fruit for her sisters. And she discovered an apple growing that from a pip from somewhere, and she took it and had it DNA tested, and it was unique. It was her own apple. Wow. So it's called Little Packs, and they've just started marketing that. We're growing it here. So I like the story of having it discovered by a nun, and wow. now completing the circle, having it here.
So nice. Now, what is the state there now? Are you is your lockdown lifted? Because we're still, where I am in Mississauga in Ontario, we're still under a lockdown restriction. So there's no bars, restaurants. They're open for takeaway, and that's it. Our cideries here have started to. Some of them have started to deliver, like direct to the consumer, and a few in our liquor stores. But more of like the smaller. More craftsman artisan cideries are kind of reaching out to us, and we were able to order direct. But are you able now? Is your stay sort of like where you can? Restaurants are open, bars, and people are populating.
Yeah, restaurants and bars opened about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
They opened a few weeks before that for outdoor service, but you could only be served outdoors. So, but now they've opened up indoors. You can be in groups of 6. You have to be seated to get a drink or eat. So it's all table service, which is kind of completely unusual here. So the whole pub thing, where you go up to the bar and you order your drinks and you have a chat to the bar person, that's not happening anymore. So, in some ways, I always thought it'd be great if more of the pubs had table service, because I kind of like that on the continent of Europe. You get served and you don't have to get up and go to the bar. But now I kind of am beginning to realize how significant pub culture and the whole setup is. And of course, it requires fewer staff. So nowadays, all of the hospitality industry is desperately short of staff, which is quite interesting. But yeah, they're open, and it's not completely open. So they were saying that our restrictions were going to be lifted completely in 2 weeks' time, but we've now got this Delta variant, I think it's called, which is more infectious and perhaps gets around the vaccines and seems to have a high hospitalization rate. So they're suggesting maybe that our lockdown is not going to be lifted now.
And
or at
so,
least the remaining restrictions.
but you said that business is still doing well. Like, is it mainly people
Our
are coming
business,
to the bottle
yeah,
shop?
our business is doing
Yeah.
well. I mean, we've kind of only started selling in the last 18 months.
Mhm.
Last year we had a really small amount of cider, so we didn't we sold it all
Didn't try too
quite
hard.
quickly, but we couldn't try too hard because we just didn't have very much. This year we upped our production 5 times, so that was quite a major expansion. So we've been having to work a bit harder selling. But yeah, we actually, so we didn't really know any different. You know, it's not as if we all of a sudden, you know, our sales rate was down, because we never had a steady state.
Well,
I
I
think
guess
it's a bit of I think it's a bit of a silver lining for us too, because there in the UK they've done a green, amber, and a red state of where you can travel to and can't travel to outside of the country, and only I don't think there's only a few for green, and amber means you have to quarantine when you come back, and red means you have to go to a special hotel and stuff. So there's a lot of what they call staycations, so people are staying in England and traveling a lot. And the island is a quite popular holiday place because it's got lots of beaches and arcades and things like that. So I think that's because we're focusing on the local made and the local produce and et cetera. I think it's kind of worked out nicely, unfortunately, for us.
Yeah, so we're selling just on this little island. The island itself is I think maybe 30 miles long and about 15 miles north south.
Okay.
So pretty small. There is only ferries to get here. There's no fixed link. So it's quite expensive to get on and off the island. It's quite well known that the ferries are pricey. So we haven't been off the island for 6 months, and it's quite expensive to ship. So we don't ship at all, but we deliver around the island ourselves, and that's as far as we want it to go. And we figure there's enough outlets here, there's enough of a market for us to be able to sell all our production. We are in quite a lucky position that there aren't any other significant cider makers on the island. We've heard that there's a couple others starting up. There's one small, long-established cidery, but they just sell out of their own cider barn.
Okay.
There was a fairly substantial, much bigger than us actually, cidery, big orchard and cidery, which stopped producing 2 or 3 years ago. So we're kind of in a lucky position that we're picking up on the market that they've now dropped.
Nice. So when you crafted your cider, or while you're crafting your ciders, from that point of when you decided this is what I want to do, what kind of taste do you like from your ciders? Are you looking at like medium, sweet, semi-sweet, dry?
We're both keen on pretty dry and maybe either West Country or Three Counties taste. So the kind of high tannins, higher bitter components, bitter sharp, bitter sweet apples. The part of the reason being it's a taste thing, and another reason being that we did a course over in Hereford. So that's one of the three counties fame. And we did a course over there, so we got to learn our craft, I guess, in that part of the world.
Nice. Well, now I'm really jealous because dry ciders are my favorite. That's what I like. The drier, the better, the bitter, the funky. I love all of that. I'm not into anything sweet at all. So that's now I'm really jealous. So what is in your glass that you wanted to tease me with?
So this is our
Experiment.
our own supply.
Personal use.
For our own personal use. We couldn't possibly sell this. You can see it's very it's quite cloudy. Now the reason being that this is the settled lees from one of the tanks that we fermented last year. So when we racked it off maybe a month or so back, we decided, let's see what happens if we just keep the lees and let them settle for a couple of weeks and then rack it off. And we racked it off into a 10-litre bag in box, so plastic bag in a box, and then left it at the back of our container where we keep all our stuff down here at the orchard. And I noticed today that the bag seemed to be expanding rather. So I thought we need to let some pressure off. We need to start drinking the liquid in there. And I think it's got a very pronounced buttery butterscotch taste, which I think is what you typically get after it's been through malolactic fermentation. And it's definitely, our ciders tend to be quite acidic because we've actually been using a lot of apples collected from people's gardens and small orchards. So these are eating apples and dessert apples and cooking apples. So not your traditional cider apples at all, very low tannins. And the cider from that tends to be quite acidic. So actually, it's great that it's gone through MLF because that'll cut the acid and soften the acid. But yeah, it was I was in a complete panic. I thought, oh no, the bag is going to burst. We're going to lose all that cider. But yeah, this is all part of our reducing waste.
That sounds great. There are a few ciders here that do the same thing or similar things where they collect apples that have fallen off of other people's trees, and they come together and make like sort of a community cider, which is reflective of the apples in their area. So is that kind of what this was?
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. So Catherine mentioned earlier the orchard where we had the Dabinet Michelin apples from 2019. We had 4 tons of apples we collected, and then the following year we only got maybe 1 ton from that orchard because it's obviously gone a bit biennial. It wasn't getting a lot of attention. The trees weren't getting a lot of attention, so I think because they weren't being pruned hard, they were left to their own devices and went very biennial. So since we'd kind of upped our production 5 times, we thought, oh no, we need a lot more food. So we put a call out to folks in the island using the sort of community networks and said, look, if anyone's got any apples, bring them to us or we'll come and collect them. And then we had 1 community pressing day in one village where a friend is quite sort of quite connected in her network, and she said, oh, why don't you come along, we'd love to have a community pressing. So we did that, but it was last summer when I guess COVID levels were quite low, but people were still anxious, very anxious about COVID. So we just did that one event, but I think this year people are feeling a bit more comfortable. As long as this current variant isn't too awful, then we'll have another go and do more of those community pressings. So we get people to bring our apples, we take half the juice and give half back.
Nice.
It worked out really, really well. Of course, you don't know exactly what you're getting, and you're going to get something different every year. But that's going to be part of our USP. Is it's going to be different every year. It's seasonal. It's whatever grows here.
It's reflective of the community, right? So it's
exactly.
Exactly. Nice. So do you want to describe a little bit about some of the ciders that you make? Like in terms of the
Well, we make 3 different ciders. We make a dry, a medium dry, and a bottle conditioned dry. So the bottle conditioned, we have put it in with a little bit of sugar and cap it and let it sit for 6 months or so. The medium dry, we've unsuccessfully been trying to rack enough so that we can have a naturally sweet cider. We haven't been successful at that yet. So we've been back sweetening and pasteurizing our mediums. And then we have a dry. So the dry is called Spelunker. It's because our cidery is in a cave. And so a spelunker is someone who explores caves. The cave is on the top of Ventnor, and it was quarried to use the building stones. Ventnor is on a cliff, essentially. It's very Mediterranean. And the buildings below are made out of the stones from the quarry above where our caves were. And then it was used as to house prisoners of war during the Napoleonic Wars. And then it was used, a train station actually cut through underneath the downs with these top cliffs and these downs. And the train came through and they stored the coal in the caves. So we've now got it. And in fact, when we were cleaning it out, it was quite cool. We would find these little candle stubs in niches inside the cave where obviously they had used it for whatever purposes. These are the prisoners or the coal miners. Okay, so that's Spelunker. Underdown is our pasteurized medium dry.
And
then
it's basically the same cider base.
yeah, same cider base. And then a different cider base is the Island Time, which is the bottle conditioned. Now in the UK, you have only 40 ingredients that I think it's about 40 ingredients that you can add to cider without going into a different duty regime.
Mhm.
So that's why we don't want to, if we were to add fruit or various things, it goes into a whole duty regime, and we don't want to go there. We're trying to stay below that. So we can stay as
It's
small
a shame because
factories.
I guess as you know, we're somewhat innovative, so we'd like to have a go with some co-ferments or not flavored ciders exactly, but you know, do some interesting stuff by adding different ingredients. But it will mean that the cider is no longer within this scheme that allows us not to list ingredients, just to call it cider, which is a protected name, and not to account for duty to the government. It would mean we're outside that, so we'd have to be dealing with duty, and it would be called made wine.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting the way the laws have developed.
So which one is your most popular? Is it the medium one?
Recently, the most popular one has been the medium. Oh look, Catherine,
Oh.
here are our labels.
Oh, beautiful.
Are they a
Backwards
mirror
and upside down,
image?
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we had them designed by a local design house, so that was kind of nice.
Nice. And where did the name come from? Grazed knee.
Grazed knee. Oh well, that was all part of the beginning of the story. We were on a bike ride, and Catherine here came off in a puddle and grazed her knee. And talking after that was one of the kernels of the idea.
What are we going to do with this?
Wow. And can you go back to the cave? So your cidery is in the cave. And in terms of like, now you mean like your production facility, or you mean like
Production facility.
Yeah. And
yeah, production facility. So we bring the apples there. We've got one area where we do pressing, and then we've got inside the cave we've put up a cabin, so a kind of prefabricated cabin, which is somewhat clean. Things not too much seems to fall off the roof of the cave, and that's where the fermentation happens, and the maturation, and the bottling, and the labeling, and
so that's why
pasteurizing.
we had to do it sitting here in the orchard, because there's no signal in the cave.
I can imagine. I'm wondering, does being in the cave, does that do anything to the temperature that you have to then adjust? In your.
The temperature seems ideal. It's between 11 and 13 all year round, centigrade.
Mm-hmm.
So in winter it's somewhat warm, but it's kind of cool enough that it's a slow fermentation. Cider goes through a pretty slow fermentation. But then it's great for storage.
Yeah, ideal temperature all year long.
Yeah,
and
yeah, we thought it was good enough for champagne. It's good enough for cider.
Absolutely. And do you have a location there that people can come to you and like a no bottle shop? No. Okay.
Like a tap room. Well, interestingly, last weekend we had for the very first time we had a license to sell direct to the public. So we don't have a full-time license. So we can currently normally only sell to licensed premises. We don't ourselves
Somebody else
have a
has
license.
to have the license.
Yeah. Okay.
But you can get a so-called temporary event notice here, which you're allowed to do for 21 days of the year. So we decided to have an open day at the cave. For 3 days, we just had a holiday weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And for the 3 days of the holiday weekend, we had visitors come over, and we had tasting, and we were able to sell direct. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's nice to be able to see your clients and your consumers as well, and get feedback from them right away. So other than that, you're supplying it's directly to like pubs and restaurants?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Nice. That's great. And any future visions or plans or things that you besides the idea of maybe having some other ingredients in there with the.
Well, I guess we're kind of all about local collaborations at the moment. So the other thing we had last weekend was we had a collaboration with the local ice cream store. and they put together a recipe for a cider sorbet, which was really great. So we gave them some cider, and they gave us back some ice cream, and then they had it on their menu for the weekend, which was really brilliant. They're kind of they're big on the Instagram thing, so they've got hundreds of followers, and all their followers saw this stuff about our cidery. And she spent all weekend telling her customers to come up to the cidery, and all the people who came up to the cidery we sent down to get ice cream. So that was really good fun.
Nice.
And then we're also discussing with a local kind of micro brewery. In fact, it's two local breweries. There's one really tiny one, maybe a nano brewery, maybe even a pico brewery. We went to visit them yesterday, and they're going to take some of our cider, and we haven't actually talked to them about whether they might want to kind of use our yeast to make some sour beer, but that's something we might talk about. And then there's the Isle of Wight Cocktail Company, which is a guy who makes ready to drink cocktails, which he supplies to pubs and bars around here, and he's putting together a cider based cocktail with our cider, which is kind of fun. Who are we talking to? That's about it. So local collaborations, I guess, is upcoming in the next little while. There's one other possibility is there's a company that makes sort of dressings and jams and fruits and stuff, and they were interested in maybe turning some of our cider into cider vinegar, apple cider vinegar.
Okay.
So that's another possibility.
Nice. I love to bake with ciders as well. So I bake with them or make jams and things with them. Another thing that you were talking about, the cider sorbet, one thing that was popular with some of the cideries here too are cider slushies. So just so just another idea if you have another company around there, or
there you go.
Yeah, in donuts and in bread as well, because the yeast helps with rising. And pies and whatnot.
That's interesting. So we do have a sourdough bakery just next door to the cidery. Perhaps we should get onto them.
Well, that was the one of Helen's COVID projects, was making sourdough. And you made some sourdough using the cider leaves as a sourdough starter.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah.
It's still going.
Yeah, you can just make your own and just
Become bakers as well.
That's
I mean, we got enough on our plate, I think.
There's a couple of other cideries around here that I've been fortunate enough to chat with during COVID, because that's just sort of how we've been traveling, right? Is by having these chats and introducing and meeting all of these wonderful cider makers such as yourselves. And it's interesting. It's the story of people creating or going into creating ciders because either their partner didn't have something to drink that they liked, or because they didn't like what their partner was drinking. I mean, I think this is the fourth time that I've heard this story, and it's the passion that from those cideries and that comes out because it's coming out of a personal desire to do something to be with somebody more. It just comes out of something so pure. So I just love that. I just love that story. You look so happy and relaxed, and you look like you are enjoying everying that what life is presenting.
We are.
And
it's perfect.
We feel very fortunate. So
yeah. Great. Well, I just wanted to thank you so much I won't take up too much more of your time, but thank you so much for chatting with me and
great to see you.
Yeah.
And if you get back to London when lockdown ever lets go, come to the island and we'll give you the tour of the cave.
Oh, absolutely, and I'll show you how to make cider slushies.
Oh, brilliant.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you, Helen. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you. Lovely meeting you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.